This video is brought to you by Infinity Knights Cross, but more on that in a little bit. Well, I've played a lot of RPGs in my time, but in case it wasn't evident from everything going on back here, I was always a Nintendo kid growing up, which meant I missed out on a lot of great Sega games, and that includes RPGs. I have played some, things like Phantasy Star 4, Shadowrun, D&D, Warriors of the Eternal Sun, but I know there's way more beyond that that I've never touched. So all of these games I've either never played or know very little about, but I wished I've played them, either back then or now. So these are all the Sega RPGs that I've missed out on. These are probably the most obvious ones. Any one of the first 3 Phantasy Star games seem right up my alley. I know the 4th one is the strongest, and that's the one I've played, but the other 3 still look really good on their own. They're all that perfect mix of high fantasy sorcery, with swords, magic, kings and kingdoms, dungeon crawling, and all kinds of monsters. But it's also got a bit of that sci-fi element, with vehicles, traveling to different planets, and things like AI technology. I know the earlier games are closer to old school dungeon crawlers, but I'm fine with that. I like those kinds of games from time to time. Plus, I think it would be neat to see how the series evolved to its pinnacle of Phantasy Star 4 from its humble roots. I know the stories aren't wholly connected, but there's a few references here and there between each game that would be neat to pick up on. But I've also been told that Phantasy Star 2 is not good? Like, not worth playing? That doesn't sound right, but I want to hear your thoughts. I even own the first game, and the others are available on Nintendo Switch Online, so I have less of an excuse to not play them. And I really do want to play them, as they seem like a wonderful piece of Sega history, with its niche RPG audience that appeals to players like me. And when anyone mentions classic Sega RPG, the first thing that always comes to my mind is the Phantasy Star games. And I'm always hearing about how excellent they are. Okay, here's another one that gets suggested to me all the time. Shining Force 2 is a strategy RPG where you move units around on a battlefield and use advantages to take down opposing forces. It's basically Sega's own Fire Emblem. Apparently it's also amazing? Admittedly, I didn't really know anything about it until way later in life. Like, I think it was 2010 when I even first learned that it existed. I think of all the Sega RPGs that are out there, Shining Force 2 is the one that probably gets recommended me to the most. Every single person who comments about it or brings it up in my Twitch chat basically says, "Oh my god, Jerk, you need to play Shining Force 2! I did play Shining Soul 2 on Game Boy Advance though. Does that count? This is Shining in the Holy Ark for the Sega Saturn, and I know even less about this one than I do every other Shining Force game. But this is part of the Shining Force series, right? Or a spin-off, whatever? I'm watching this footage for it right now, and dude, this looks dope. I'm loving the pre-rendered sprite graphics for everyone. It's clearly another first-person dungeon crawler with random turn-based battles. It also makes me think that you'd want to have some graph paper nearby to draw out the map of whatever dungeon you're in, which I love doing, but thankfully there is an in-game auto map, so that alone does make it way more playable. It also has town segments that you can freely explore in there too. It actually kind of reminds me of really old games like AD&D Pool of Radiance for DOS. Actually, no, you know what this makes me think of? The Golden Sun games. Very similar graphics, the turn-based battles, and okay, actually, yeah, I looked it up. This was made by Camelot, literally the same developer as Golden Sun. Alright, I'm sold. I want to play this. Oh, you know what's another RPG I wish I could play? Infinity Knights Cross, who is also this video's sponsor. Infinity Knights Cross is a love letter to the 16-bit RPG era. It's an action RPG allowing your party of 3 to run around with different weapons and abilities to save the world. The emphasis is on action, so expect slashing along with blocking, dodging, and countering. And with a 3-person party, the game is entirely 3-player co-op. There's even special co-op maneuvers like syncing up to cast your spells faster. Get all kinds of different weapons or armaments to use, and you can freely swap between them even in the middle of a combo. There are multiple playable characters you can select, traverse a wide variety of landscapes and dungeons, and there will also be some randomized dungeons for an extra challenge. And when you're not hacking and slashing, you can always develop the kingdom by expanding it through fishing, woodcutting, gardening, making potions, and using the blacksmith to improve your weapons. And if those ever bore you, you can always play some mini games like Gem Break. It's also super customizable with tons of difficulty and accessibility options like being able to freely adjust the HUD. If that all doesn't excite you enough, then you should know that the music is done by Hiroki Kakuta, the same composer who did the music for Secret of Mana and Visions of Mana. Right now, the Infinity Nights Cross Kickstarter is still going, and if they can hit all their stretch goals, they will literally double the size of the game. And I believe in the project, so to prove it, here's me actually going to their Kickstarter and backing it. So click the Kickstarter link in the description below if you want to back them and help them out too. In fact, while we're at it, let's go ahead and wishlist them on Steam, since that'll also really help them out. Click the Kickstarter link, back the game if you like what you see, and wishlist them on Steam. And thanks again to Infinity Nights Cross for sponsoring this video. I can't wait to play. Well, it's pretty obviously this is just Zelda 1. They aren't even hiding it. Golden Axe Warrior for the Sega Master System was also completely overlooked by me. Mostly because I never owned a Master System as a kid, and because I was definitely that kind of Nintendo kid who had an undying allegiance in the console war, so I wouldn't even touch a Zelda clone. This looks solid though. I really like how much the colors pop with the subtle shading. I mean, I do love Zelda 1, so I think I'd enjoy this one too. It has that sense of exploration with dungeons to tumble into, secret entrances that lead to monsters, money, or even heart upgrades. Plus, with so few RPGs on the Sega Master System, how many people out there can even say, I played an RPG on the Master System? Now, apparently, this isn't even the best Zelda clone Sega has ever made, because that accolade goes to another. Crusader of Senti for the Sega Genesis. It's definitely one I've never played, and will likely never own a copy of it because it's one of the rarest games out there and it's worth like $1 billion. Anyway, if Golden Axe Warrior was Zelda 1, Crusader of Senti is Link to the Past. Look at the polish this game has though. The animations are butter smooth, the graphics are fantastic, and this is some really good music. One of the main mechanics revolves around what animal companion you have out. Each one of them gives you different abilities to use, like helping you in combat by pinning down enemies, or upgrading your sword to have different elements. It's also very similar to Zelda in that you'll have areas you can go to, but can't actually explore yet because you're missing some key item to be able to access it completely. So it sounds like a lot of wandering around, slashing enemies, and occasionally doing a dungeon. And every now and then, bees! I'm sure I'll get to this eventually. Thankfully, it was recently added to the Nintendo Switch Online Sega Collection, which, thank God for that, because there ain't no way I'm buying a real cartridge of it anytime soon. Okay, I know I've mentioned this one before and I've gotten yelled at for it, and I still haven't fixed it. I've never played Lunar the Silver Star or Lunar 2 Eternal Blue. From what I gather, these are basically the essential RPGs available for the Sega CD. They have lots of anime cutscenes, competent voice acting, and really good music. The battles look cool too, since they're more than just turn-based attacks. Your party members move around on the battlefield, which means they need to get into range to melee swing, and injured party members can retreat into a corner and see if they can out-hide their problems, which I can relate with. I really don't know much about the plot though. Something about dragons, I want to say. So also, are the games connected? Like, is it the same protagonist going from one to the other? Because if that's the case, I should probably play the first one before the second game, right? Or is the first one skippable and the second one is just that much better? Here's my biggest struggle with playing Lunar though. There's 3 different versions of it. The Sega CD original, a PlayStation 1 touched-up port, and a PSP remake. I've gotten a lot of conflicting opinions on which version to play. It seemed like the PS1 version is the way to go, and to avoid the PSP one if I can. Did I get that right? I do know don't play the DS game. Apparently that one's just really bad. But also, I don't know, I think there's something novel to playing a Sega CD RPG, so part of me wants to experience it in the original way. I don't know, I'll let future me figure out that decision based on what you guys say.
Hurry up and get the dragon's eye. The timer's almost run out on the trap.
Trap? What trap?
Whoa! This trap!
Landstalker is another Sega Genesis action RPG that I've never actually touched. I've seen it played before in videos by other YouTubers, so I at least have an idea of what it's like. It's an action platformer RPG with everything in this isometric viewpoint as you walk around and slash your sword at enemies. Though I think the term RPG fits in pretty loosely here. Like, for the most part, you get to go to towns and find heart containers to increase your maximum life, but that's about it? There might be side quests, I guess. I'm not sure if this game is RPG enough for me. Yeah, I don't know about this one. It's lower on the priority list for sure, as it seems more like an action game than anything else. I'm sure it's still decent to play, and maybe someday I'll get to it, especially since it's also on the Nintendo Switch Online Genesis games. But I don't think I'll play this one before several of the others in this video. Which Dark Savior on the Sega Saturn is one I technically have played before, but only for like an hour? It looks really similar to Landstalker, and that's because it's made by the same studio. Dark Savior is basically a spiritual successor to it, complete with the isometric view, puzzle solving, and a fair amount of platforming in it. Only this one actually has more RPG elements in it. Like, at least there's battle scenes and hit points. The battle scenes are not what you'd expect either from what I remember. It ends up playing more like a one-on-one fighting game than anything else, with controls that I could never quite figure out. I do know that one of the major mechanics of the game is based on time. Early on, you're on a ship or something, and depending on how quickly you get to the captain's quarters, will completely change how the rest of the game plays out, which sounds fascinating and good for multiple playthroughs. Aside from that, I also really love the detailed sprite look, and it looks great against the polygonal environments. This is another one where I'm not quite sure if you'd count this as a full RPG or even one worth my playing, but I think I'm more interested in this one than I am Landstalker. Another obscure Sega CD game, Popful Mail, has always been on my radar since its North American publication was handled by Working Designs, so that alone gets my attention. Popful Mail is a very anime side-scrolling action RPG. There's a fair amount of platforming, sword slashing, but also talking with NPCs. There's no experience points or leveling up, but you do earn money that you can use to purchase new upgrades in shops. You'll start with playing as Mail herself, but as you go, there's more playable characters that join the party. I love the aesthetic of this game with the bright colors and environments, plus I'm a sucker for that 90s anime aesthetic, so all the animated cutscenes seem like a treat. I know it's somewhat of a shorter game too, like 5 or 6 hours or so it'd be a quick playthrough for me to do. So here's the thing though, I own Popful Mail. I'd even tried to play it on my Sega CD. However, at the exact same spot, only a few steps into the first level, I keep getting this crash error. I've tried everything I could to fix it, like clearing the RAM cache and all that, but nothing has worked. Does anyone know how to fix this error? Please help me out. I want to play Popful Mail.
Here goes nothing.
Uh-oh.
I basically completely missed out on the Sega Dreamcast, aside from renting it like once or twice so I could play the crap out of Soul Calibur and Power Stone. It also means I missed out on every Dreamcast RPG. Well, almost all of them. One of the big ones were the Evolution games. Evolution, The World of Sacred Device, and Evolution 2, Far Off Promise. There's no way these can top Skies of Arcadia or Grandia 2 though, right? This kind of reminds me of Mega Man Legends a bit, with the low polygon anime look, exploring through ruins and finding treasures, and talking to quirky characters in the hub town. By my understanding, the dungeons are randomized every time though. It uses procedurally generated floors, which means a lot of square rooms connected by straight hallways. I feel like this could get tiring really quickly. The second Evolution game adds in more characters and voice acting. Maybe there's enough variety and new features to make playing the second one worth it over the first game? But here's the question though. Say I choose to play it, is it really worth playing these, or should I just play the enhanced GameCube version, Evolution Worlds? It has both games together and conjoins them neatly into one disc. Also, I actually own the GameCube version, so this might be one where I just go for the GameCube version instead, just like I did with Skies of Arcadia. Related on the Dreamcast RPG front, I've never played Shenmue. I mean, this game is RPG enough, right? This is one of those games where I've never touched it, but I have plenty of offhand knowledge of it thanks to how much it's been discussed over the years. Shenmue was the groundbreaking 3D action RPG when it came out. Fully immersive world, literally every single thing is interactable. Open up every drawer, cupboard, and pantry door in your house to keep finding absolutely nothing. It's highly considered to be the first instance of QuickTime events, everyone's favorite gaming innovation. The town is completely fleshed out with every NPC having their own unique appearance, daily routine, and they're all voice acted.
Here you go! Milk's perfect for a schoolboy, I'd say.
Are those guys sailors?
All bit crushed, blown out, overly compressed, terribly, hilariously voice acted. I know very little of this game has actually aged well, but it's such a perfect time capsule of late 90s gaming. I hope it's still worth playing and not just a novelty for when it first came out.
I'm looking for a man who goes by the name Charlie.
I hear a lot of rumors about him. That he's one nasty piece of work.
Do you know where I can find him?
Where he's at, I wouldn't know that.
This is another one of those Sega Genesis staples that I've never touched, and people suggest it to me pretty often. Sword of Vermilion is one of the earliest Genesis RPGs too, and this is another one that has a lot going on. It's got typical fantasy fare for the story, plenty of staples like hit points, magic points, experience points, and leveling up, but the exploration is done in first-person mode, and random battles then switch to an overhead action game, which it seems like this pretty much means slashing away at like 8 of whatever it is you stumble into. I do like how when you're in dungeons, there's also a map on the side to help make traversal way easier. You also have overhead free movement when you're in towns, allowing you to talk to people, buy new equipment and dungeon maps and the like. But also, when you get to a boss fight, it switches to a one-on-one fighter kind of game? I don't know, this one looks more ambitious than it is good. But I've never played it, so I'm not really sure. I'd try it purely out of curiosity, especially since it's a very unique Sega RPG. Probably lower on my want to play list for sure, but worth noting. I know there's way more Sega RPGs aside from these. I didn't even think about the PlayStation 2 or beyond, or the Game Boy Advance. Oh, geez. If there's even more worth talking about, maybe I can do a follow-up video showcasing some other ones that looked good, or ones that you have all suggested to me. For now, though, let me know what you think of each of these. Which ones are worth skipping, which ones are must-plays, or which ones should be played but on a different platform. I'm really curious what you all think, and hopefully you can help me expand my RPG horizons.